There is something wrong with every engine that's ever been built. Not one is perfect. This is a video on everything wrong with a 6.0 Powerstroke. Now, we make these videos not because we hate everything. We make these videos so you guys can be aware of what will cost you money or what there's a good chance will cost you money and what to look for when you go buy a truck. We have them on Duramax's, Cummins, gas engines, Mercedes. So check those out as well. But to help me out, I got my buddy Justin. Got any experience on these?
8 years.
8 years. Justin runs a fleet of buses that had these in there, so if it's happened, he's seen it, and we want to get into this engine and show you what to look out for if you own or are thinking about buying a 6.0. Here we go. When they're working good. They're working good. They pull like crazy. It's embarrassing to a Cummins, really. If you were to tow together, blow the Cummins away. It's just the cost of doing that and keeping that is not worth it. Slow and steady wins the race, right?
Yeah.
Cummins is putting out well over 1 million miles, and these are lucky to get 200,000. They are some of the best sounding diesels in my opinion too. They still have a nice tone to it.
When they're running right.
When they're running right. As soon as you start throwing more boost and fuel at it, head gaskets were a big issue, and studding them helped, yeah. But they're missing 2 bolts. Where the Duramaxes and Cummins have 6 bolts per cylinder, these ones only have 4. Interesting enough that in 06, I would go Duramax or Cummins, hands down. What is it? Cummins in a Ford with an Allison transmission, right? Yeah. All right, let's start at the very front. Go from there.
So the first problem we've seen with them is the fan clutch wire. The distance between the fan and the wire. When this gets hot and the fan pulls, sometimes this wire would come in here and clip. That would cause tranny issues, no starts, just stall on the road, all different kinds of stuff like that. To change the EGR, which is exhaust gas recirculation valve, it's way down in here underneath your turbo pipes. So your turbo pipes and everything would have to come off. Your brackets, on the cutaways, there's big wiring harnesses, air tubes and all that stuff would have to come off.
If you're gonna work on it, you gotta pull the cab, which is fine if everything comes apart nice and doesn't break.
The IPR, which is your injection pressure regulator, it's buried back down under in here to your high pressure oil pump, which is another labor intense job, more so in a pickup truck, because the vans actually have a doghouse here where you can get to these pipes pretty easily. Pickup trucks, you pretty much stand on your head to get those IPRs out of there.
Okay.
EGR coolers, that's another big job. Like you have to take your alternators, your turbochargers, your intake, all of that has to come off.
Just an EGR cooler fail, how many hours?
Oh, you're into it for at least 12 hours a day.
A day?
A day. I have put aftermarket EGR coolers on them before, but they just don't seem to fit the same. Like it's just not as good.
If you guys need any parts off of this engine, if they're any good, they will be at Tewsley's Auto Wreckers, so you can hit them up, they are online. The fan shroud, however, is not going to be on that list. Now, normally you'd take a long air hammer and a punch.
There are special tools for that from Ford, yeah.
Yeah, he's got them, I don't. Issues with the turbo?
I've only ever seen one turbo shaft snap in them. Other
really?
than that, we never had any issues with them.
And keeping in mind that you work on everything stock. No tuners, no upgrades, no delete kits, nothing, right?
Nothing. Everything stayed stock.
The 6-liter turbos were all right. This is Garrett. The 6.4 turbos there was huge issues with them, right?
Well, 6.4s I believe had twin turbos.
Right, so same kind of a variance of it in our Audi, but I think they had some massive issues with them. Give them some to it. Oh, look at that! It's nice working on a stand, and just imagine crawling in under the hood of a truck. We got a little mouse living here, so thanks Ansell for these nice gloves. All right, just wanted to take a quick minute to give a big shout out to Ansell. Thank you very much for sending us gloves that we're using in this video. Also, a big thank you to you guys with all the positive comments in all the previous videos where I'm wearing gloves. Some of you guys mentioned that these high flex 727s are your favorite, so I thought we'd try them out. And so far, so good. We got the rubber on the inside, the cloth on the outside, allowing it to breathe really, really well. Whereas I can only wear the throwaway nitro gloves for about 5 minutes before my hands get all sweaty. These are a good hour before I feel the need to take them off and just let my hands air out. So definitely check out Ansell's website, everything they have to offer. They've got tons of different styles and different applications. And so far, these are the perfect gloves to tear into our mouse-infested, rusty, crusty old Powerstroke. And if you're not filthy, you're not rich, but it's okay. Look how filthy those gloves are. It doesn't have to be your fingertips. Here we go.
I've seen these map sensors tubes plug up before with diesel soot as well.
Oh yeah. So your map sensor is kind of important.
ICP, injection control regulator. That's got to see about 500 PSI of oil pressure before the engine will start.
Yeah. Andy from Tewsley had a high pressure oil leak. Yeah. And it wouldn't start when the oil was hot.
That's right. The high pressure oil leaks are common with all the O-rings and stuff that they use in the oil feed rails. Sometimes you get lucky if you shut the vehicle off while it's hot, you get a no start. Sometimes if you wait half an hour, depending on the temperature outside, you might get lucky and they'll restart for you.
And if not,
they'll get you where you're going, maybe.
But if not, it's a complete teardown of the whole engine to find the O-ring.
Yeah, there's actually a tool that you can get for that goes in where your injection pressure regulator is, and you can put air pressure to it.
Okay.
And then you can listen for air to kind of try to pinpoint which side you're looking at.
Yeah.
But usually you're into taking the valve covers off to see it.
Okay. And you're still this far in.
Yeah.
Can you take the valve covers off without the turbo and all that shit?
You can. I know in the cutaway chassis you have to roll the engine a bit, so you undo your lower mount. Yep. And then you can tweak them a bit enough to get the valve cover to roll out, and then you can get your oil manifolds off and stuff. This is the EGR. There's a little bit of soot on there. That stuff will get in between that valve there, because these are supposed to open, and the diesel soot gets hung up on the seats in there and holds it open like that, and you lose horsepower. Every one of these are a different size. 20, 19, 21.
Small, medium, large. That's what it should be. It's like, it doesn't matter if it's a small line. It's like, just put the same freaking fitting on it. All nice stainless lines. Little fuel filter, any issues with that?
Nope. There's two filters usually on. There's one in the frame, and then there's that one.
Okay. The oil filters down here?
Yeah, on the E450 cutaways or cutaway chassis, the oil filters are generally down there. The trucks, I believe, they're up here.
Oh, okay.
In a canister. These here too, a lot of times when you get into these, the oil filter, so if you're into taking out the intake,
yep, you gotta,
sometimes they have dual alternator setups. The second alternator usually goes here. So you're into another bracket, another alternator, just to get this banjo nut off, bolt off, to get the fuel line out in order to get the intake off.
That's it? Nothing there?
No, these have to come out, the oil cooler lines.
Okay.
This is just your turbo pedestal bolts down in here. There's 4 of them.
Take them too?
Yeah, they come out. This is the return line for your turbo.
Yep.
Hopefully it comes out. It might be seized in there because this thing's been sitting for a while.
Yeah. Oh, look at that. Oh. Remember, everything's a hammer. Except the screwdriver, that's a punch.
You guys undo this tube. These tubes, they got 3 marks on them. We could just cut it. That takes the fun out of it. It's off.
Nice.
There's that O-ring. That lets your coolant come up into the bottom of the intake.
Okay.
Then it goes into the cooler from there, and then I believe it returns through this blue tube into here.
So a delete kit just plugs that.
No, I don't know how the delete kit works. I've never seen one.
Okay, well we won't talk about that then. But well, you'd have to go this far.
You'd have to
put
go
the
this,
delete kit
yeah.
out.
My guess would be this would come out.
Yeah.
And then you got your coolant here and your EGR here. I imagine there's a plate that gets bolted in there.
Okay. So this O-ring.
Yeah.
This nice big fat O-ring. These are an issue?
If you're not paying attention when you take them apart, if somebody's never done it before.
Yep.
And it gets stuck to the bottom of the intake and falls down before you get the intake off and you don't know that it's there, you could run into trouble.
Right. Any trick to the glow plugs?
The glow plugs?
Yeah.
Yeah, good luck. Honestly, I've never changed glow plugs in them.
Oh, nice. Because that was always a big issue with the 7.3s, the stupid glow plugs. The glow plugs are very good on the 6.0.
There is a special tool for this when it's in the vehicle. We have more room right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Just because firewalls and shit is in the way, so it's got wonky.
Well, the thing is, to get this out, you've seen all the turbo tubes and stuff in there before, all your exhaust tubes. You're fighting all those to get it in and out of there when it's in the vehicle, because you don't want to take all those tubes off. So there's a special tool. They can be changed without removing those pipes.
Okay.
These are the screens. This one's been hit. See how it's shoved down?
Yep.
It's concaved in there a bit.
Yep.
So something's like, they're basically self-disintegrating the inside and stuff starts hitting them.
You can see the filings in there too, right?
Yeah, sometimes the screens, they'll have holes in them too as well, and I believe that's what causes the IPRs to fail.
Okay. Not much shit in there, but there's shit in there. It's doing its job. But yeah, if it's a chintzy screen that just I've
seen them like that and better than that in the vehicle not start and it be the IPR.
Really?
Yeah. That cover seized on there.
Justin!
There it goes.
There we go.
This is the feeds the branch tube.
Okay.
So the high pressure engine oil comes through here, and this here, right, there's an O-ring in there. This isn't the upgraded one, and they'll blow oil out here, and that'll cause a high pressure oil leak as well.
Okay. So take us through the oiling system. We got a low pressure oil pump at the front.
Yeah, your basic engine oil pump at the front.
Okay, so that lubricates the engine.
Lubricates the engine and feeds the gallery under here, which in turn feeds the oil pump.
Okay.
And then this brings the pressure up to feed the high pressure oil rails. We'll get into that once we pull the valve covers off.
Okay, now there was an issue with the low pressure pump rattling loose?
No, not rattling loose, walking forward and actually cut into the housing on the earlier models.
Okay, so that was a fix after a couple of years?
If I remember correctly, there was a upgraded front crank seal.
Okay.
They had like a...
That would push up against it?
Yeah, it almost have almost like a speedy sleeve in between,
okay.
And then that'd press on.
Okay.
To help hold the main pump back.
Because it's not bolted?
It's not bolted, it just slides onto the front of the crank. That's the oil cooler under there.
Oh yeah.
Oil coolers are known to crack in them as well. Put coolant in the engine oil.
Okay, so you've got to decide whether it's the EGR or the oil cooler that's...
Well, the EGR generally puts the coolant out the exhaust. The oil cooler will put the coolant into the oil.
Okay, and if there's a cracked Injector sleeve, it's...
If the injector cup cracks, or the gallery through the engine's got a crack in it, it'll leak into the coolant, so you have diesel fuel in your coolant.
Okay. And then it's a guess as to which side and where to diagnose.
That's right. It's really hard to diagnose. I've pressure tested each cylinder head with the cooling system. The cylinder heads can go on either side, so this is your fuel port right here. So if you take that out, and you take the one out on the front and block it, you can charge it with air and watch for bubbles in the coolant.
Oh, an individual cylinder head.
Individual cylinder heads, yeah, you can isolate that way.
Oh, nice.
But I didn't
You
have
just can't get at it.
No, it's ignorant to get to. Your fuel lines that come up here, I blocked the fuel lines up here so I didn't have to interrupt the cooling system.
Oh, I see.
So you block it off up here where it goes into the filter, and then you can charge it with air from the back.
So, good thing, finish my coffee.
So that's the valley that feeds the high pressure oil pump. So the low pressure oil pump fills this.
Okay.
And then we'll see the screen once we get down in there.
So you said you've seen these hit 1 million on the chassis, and I'm like, oh, 6 liters hitting 1 million? He's like, yeah, but that's like 3 engines.
Yeah.
So the life expectancy is like tops is 300,000?
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky, okay.
But that's not without tearing it down and doing something major to it.
Okay.
Because they're notorious for injectors and everything else.
Yep.
This is the screen. This one doesn't look too bad. I don't see any holes in it yet, but you can see all the contamination on it. See all the little filings? Contamination. It's probably aluminum filings.
Okay.
So this is another common problem with them. Standpipe. This is a standpipe. It goes down to your branch tube and feeds the high pressure oil rail with the oil from the pump. And a lot of times these O-rings will leak. There was a bit of an upgrade that they used on the newer models, and it's that little white, well, this one doesn't have it. There's usually a little white nylon washer that goes underneath the black one to help seal it. That's about the only update they did. And then there's more rubber O-rings in here that you gotta watch. Wow. There's 3 rubber O-rings on this one and 1 on this one.
So these O-rings fail, and
these O-rings fail and cause a high pressure oil leak, which results into a no start. And then, so that's just on the one that feeds it. And then you have a plug, because these will fit either side. This is they call it a dummy plug. It just plugs the hole. This one's got the update on it. See, it's got the little nylon washer as well as the rubber washer on the top and bottom.
Okay.
Where that one does not. So somebody's changed this before, that hasn't been changed, or when it was changed, they still didn't have the update. Like, we always change these whenever you open them up, just to avoid a high pressure oil leak and a no start. Sometimes if it's not that bad of a leak, it will catch on ether because you're spinning the pump faster and you're getting your pressures up.
Right.
But other times, if it's too bad, you can usually tell by the pressure of your IPR if you're lucky enough to have a scanner to read that.
Okay.
That's the high pressure oil rail. These ports here feed the top of the injector with the high pressure oil. It comes from your pump. Oh, there's more O-rings in there.
Yeah.
We'll pull an injector and we'll see the O-rings on there as well. So the high pressure oil goes in here, which is then activated by the electronic solenoid, which then puts pressure for the tip, and in between these 2 O-rings here is where the cutout where it's fed the diesel fuel in the cylinder head. And then you always got to watch for the copper washers on the bottom. And if you ever change them, you got to make sure the hole's clean and you get proper torque on them. If not, you could end up with burning out the copper washer with the combustion gases, which will then burn out this O-ring, and then you'll hydraulic your engine with diesel fuel. Because it'll dump all the fuel into that cylinder. It's got all the fuel in this rail to feed everything. So now you've opened it up and it's just gonna pour in there because it's under constant fuel pressure.
So, interesting enough, in your 8 years of working on nothing but these engines, you've never done a head gasket.
No.
And that's because they were always stock.
That's correct.
Right.
Everything I worked on was stock.
Okay, so once you start jacking it up, which a lot of people like to do, that's when you start getting into the head gaskets.
Could possibly be as soon as you start adding more power, then
more fuel, more boost, right? Studding it definitely helps, but there's only 4 bolts per cylinder, right? In my opinion, when you jack it up, studding it only makes it as good as the stock other ones. But that's debatable. That's up to you guys. The biggest issue with head gaskets is people misdiagnosing them.
Yeah, a lot of times that you'll see guys changing head gaskets and then going ahead putting the engine back together and find out their EGR cooler's leaking.
Yeah, or
because the EGR cooler shows the same symptoms as a head gasket. You're blowing smoke out the exhaust.
Right.
There is more O-rings underneath this high pressure oil pump. There's one right here, which is the main feed to the pump, so that sometimes you'll get a leak there. And I've also seen them leak just out of here.
You can't see it leak. You have to assume that it's leaking because it's just dumping oil back in again.
What happens is, well, you got to have them apart to do air tests. So you take the top cover off, and while this is in here, and you keep your high pressure oil rails on.
Okay.
You charge this with air pressure through your IPR port, and you'll see
the bubbles.
Well, not so much bubbles, but like the oil will kind of spray out of there in a mist.
Okay.
So it almost looks like smoke, but it's just mist of the oil coming out. So that's usually how you can tell where they are.
Okay.
I've only ever seen one, this tube right here. And in order to change that, the tube's cheap, but you got to take the cylinder heads off to change it to get to the bolts that hold it to the block.
And you've only ever done it that once?
I've only had that happen to me once.
Okay, now there's a leak here too?
Yep, this is the older style one, I believe.
Even though it's an 06?
Yeah, this is still the first generation of it, because the newer style ones don't turn like this. They're fixed. Okay. And this nut turns on the actual tube. Right. And it pulls the tube in tight.
So it's a flared fitting rather than another
I'm pretty sure it's flared. I'd have to double check, but it's definitely a different setup than this.
Have you seen a lot of breaks on the high pressure oil pump, or is it just all the O-rings and...
No, the high pressure oil pumps do fail too. I've had one fail on me. I had it, the vehicle was running that I took it out of. I put it into another vehicle and ended up pulling it apart and putting a high pressure oil pump in it, just like that.
Just like that?
Just like that.
This is...
Well, that's the exhaust back pressure sensor. So that controls the wastegate on the turbo. And so if your EGR fails with the coolant in it, and you get the diesel soot like we talked about earlier, which will plug your EGR and could possibly plug the back pressure sensor, which will cause no engine horsepower. Sometimes you just got to take them off, look inside. Sometimes they're filled right up to the top here, just flush with soot.
Yeah.
Not only do you got to check the sensor, but you got to check the tube. The best way to check the tube is if you have the engine together enough to fire it up to check to see if you're actually getting pressure out of there, because they'll plug up here, they'll plug down here, and you'll have no turbo boost.
Right, so that's just if you're low power situation, just check your back pressure first.
Yeah.
This one's easy enough to get at.
Yeah, all this is usually snowballed off of like a failure EGR cooler.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so which is common on these things.
Yeah.
And just because you do it once doesn't mean you're not going to have to do it again.
Right.
And it's a pricey job. You're into it for at least 10 hours.
Yeah. Which is why most people do the delete.
Basically, whenever I do an EGR cooler, I take this out and check it anyway.
Right.
Because you know, if the EGR's got soot in it and the intake's got soot, this is the smallest hole it's going to plug.
Okay.
So it's always good to check that if you're into it.
Yeah. So this one would have been running like a bag anyway.
It would have been. It probably wasn't shifting right. Probably didn't have much horsepower.
Yeah.
And
but so far that's the only thing that we really found wrong with this one so far.
Yeah, without scanning it and being in a vehicle, because you can check the injectors, you can do buzz tests on them, make sure they're all clicking. I always like to check them when they're cold, because sometimes these engines misfired when they were cold and then straighten themselves out when they got hot. And then other times you wouldn't develop a mist till it got hot. So you basically need a scanner, so you're into money.
Your valves don't go through the aluminum part, but it's bolted down through the aluminum part.
Yeah, and these little clips here, I've seen those in the oil pan before when we took them off. So the engine's still running fine, but it's still putting shrapnel into the engine, which isn't good.
Yeah, they're just folded over.
They basically self-destruct themselves.
Okay. At least I got some nuts and bolts. Any issues with push rods?
No.
No?
The biggest issue was the fuel delivery system on them.
Okay.
Like right from the electronic part right to the oil leaks.
Yeah, just too much.
this is the bolts that hold that branch tube in. That you gotta take the heads off if that cracks.
Right. So this one was full of water?
Yeah, I just probably been sitting with the wreckers.
Yeah. And it's not that every single engine is going to have these issues, but it's like your grandfather that smokes. It's like, yeah, my grandfather smoked his whole life and made it to 95, and I'm like, that's great. But all his friends died 15 years ago, right?
Yeah.
These are just issues that are more common than they should be.
Yeah.
So, and I understand that Navistar designed it and Ford used it, and that gave Ford a bad name. At the same time, like if you had somebody build you a deck, like you don't say, build me a deck that can hold 10 people and that's it, and then you leave. It's like, no, you want to be a part of it. You're like, well, I want a corner here, I want the table here, I want this here. So if you can tell me that Ford didn't have anything to do with his engine, like that's even more embarrassing than being a part of it, because you're like, we have this truck, this is what we want. Don't tell me that there's not a Ford engineer sitting at the table and being a part of it, right?
I think they're still fighting over this engine.
They are, yeah. Yeah, a lot of legal issues. Ford specifically said make it fail right after warranty is over, and unfortunately a lot of them broke just before warranty is over. Just from a visual, none of these are cracked. All right, so we're gonna have lots of arguments, guys defending this engine, saying that they're great engines. It's just what we experience might be different from you. You've been at it for 8 solid years, not just driving one truck. You've seen hundreds of these go through the shop.
We had about 15 6-liters in particular in the fleet. All the stuff that we showed you here, like I've done high pressure oil pumps, oil coolers, EGR coolers, injectors. It gets really expensive for the customer, not just in labor, but the parts aren't cheap either.
Okay.
And there wasn't really any big upgrades they did to correct anything. The whole system's just polluted with rubber O-rings everywhere.
Right.
So everywhere you got an oil ring, you have a chance for it to leak.
Right, and that causes a no start or
yeah, high pressure
running.
oil leaks. Yeah. That's the biggest complaint I had with these engines is the fuel system.
It's interesting to hear because a lot of people having head gasket issues, and you have to stud them. In the process of studding it, you've also disrupted 80 other things, all the different O-rings that potentially could be an issue afterwards. One little piece of dirt in the copper washer, and that creates another problem, right?
Yeah, it just snowballs from there.
The 6-liters were in the pickup trucks from 04 to 06 or 07. They were in the cutaways longer, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, and the physical size, they didn't offer a diesel after 09. They ran out of enough engines, and maybe the emissions restrictions were a little bit less on the buses that they could keep running the 6.0s. It was the emissions that plagued Ford with having to come down, right? So, but after 09, they don't offer diesels in the buses or the cutaways anymore. Now it's the V10s running on propane.
That's what our fleet is, yes.
Yeah, because the 6.4s and the 6.7s were physically so big they don't fit in the cutaways. So if you are going to buy one of these engines, you almost want to hear it run beforehand. And if you're going to swap it into something, take it right down and do all this on the bench in a nice clean environment, and then put it back in and run. But
well, the ideal thing is if you buy one, try to buy one that's in a vehicle already running. That way you can go through it with a scanner, or hire somebody to go through it with a scanner that knows what the specs are for your IPR, your Fickham voltages, all that stuff, and you can run buzz tests on the injectors, because the last thing you want to do is put it in a truck and then find out, oh, it's got a bad injector.
Yeah. How much are injectors? Do you remember?
Oh, $350, $400 per.
Typical, but times 8.
Yeah, times 8. You want to change the standpipes and dummy plugs while you're in there, because
those O-rings.
They'll leak eventually.
And then the cups too yet? The cups leak?
The injector cups, I didn't see too many issues with them, but I've heard guys having issues with them.
Okay.
But again, there's special tools for changing those too. So you're into more money.
Yep. So these were entering the shop as I was leaving the shop when I was at my previous employer. So really appreciate your knowledge on these and giving us the in-depth on absolutely everything. There is a reason why we don't get into Powerstrokes and why I have such a bad taste in my mouth, because it's fine now that it's 15 years later and we know all the issues and there's enough forums on there to help guide you through. Back when these were coming out in 04, 05, 06, there's so many issues that the Ford techs didn't know about, right?
Yeah.
I've had friends who had it warranted through the Ford dealership, and it's always downtime. We all ran businesses ourselves, and it's seasonal, so he's down his truck, he's got to rent another truck, and then thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars spent on this truck, and then when it was out of warranty, he wanted to trade it in. Ford dealership's like, we don't want the truck.
Yeah.
It's like, you did all the work, you have everything on file, and like, yeah, we don't want it. It's worthless after.
That's right.
After
yeah.
6, 7 years.
You've seen them like probably a few years back now. You've seen the prices of the Fords with the 6 liters, where you had the other makes and models with diesels in them, and they were way up here on the scale, and the 6 liters were down here. That just tells you right there that there was a big issue. Thanks
for watching, guys. Definitely comment down below if I missed something, and definitely comment if you think we're full of it. But this is why I asked Justin, because he's got the experience. So remember, get out there and work on it. Except if it's a Powerstroke, just throw it away and start over. Here we go.